Today I'm going to start this podcast with a quote from a good friend of mine called Ambrose Muchibi. He is an educationist and also an author of a very powerful book titled After University, What Next? And I think Ambrose Muchibi was winging this quote from Albert Einstein, who said that not everything that can be counted counts, and not everything that counts can be counted. So, quote, Ambrose, just because academic grades can be counted does not mean that they matter most. And because there are no mechanics to measure and count what people have learned outside the formal curriculum does not mean that it does not count. In fact, it counts most in real life. The challenge is we are going to spend our lives in school where we are only judged by what can be counted, or shall we spend it in the real world where the uncountable counts more than the countable? Today in the podcast, we're talking about the philosophy of graduation. You want to stay tuned on this one.
Welcome to the Life Signatures podcast with Lawrence Namale. Lawrence is a life coach, author, and keynote speaker who loves to tackle different topics on purpose, productivity, and resilience. His mission in life is to awaken all your boundless possibilities available in you. Life Signatures podcast is dedicated to bring to reality every single person who knows that deep down in their gut, there's got to be more to life than this. And now, here is your host, Lawrence Namale.
What does the modern world today have to do with graduation? What does the modern job market today have to do with graduation from an institution, an academic institution? See, the fact of the matter is that this used to matter a lot in the days that passed. When I was a kid growing up, we didn't have TV, but we did have radio. And for some reason, every time there was a graduation ceremony, we had only 5 public universities serving a whole country of more than 30 million people. And every time there was a graduation from any one of those 5 public universities, guess what? They will announce live that graduation ceremony on radio. And it captured our attentions. We knew that the holy grail of success, you needed to be one of those guys whose names are going to be mentioned on radio as you're graduating. And then the president, who was the chancellor of all the universities, will come and will confer on you a degree and give you the powers and so on and so forth. That was the story. That was the philosophy that I was brought up with. And so the philosophy of graduation was that the only guys who are going to make it in life as it is are the guys who are going to have a degree, which we've talked about in an earlier podcast, and who are going to graduate. And so we looked forward to this. Everyone was garnering towards this, so much so that your relatives looked down on you. Forget that they didn't have the degrees themselves, but they looked down on you if you did not get the opportunity to go to university. And I never got the opportunity to go to university, and it ate me away, and so on and so forth. But the thing is this: the philosophy of graduation is a special philosophy, and I want us to talk about it today, because in our minds we think that graduation is an ultimate climax. It is a pinnacle. It is an epitome of academia. It is an epitome of learning. And once you get there, you have basically excused yourself officially from the burden. We used to look at learning as a burden, from the burden of learning. So this philosophy of graduation states that school was torture and graduation is official declaration of the end of school. Consequently, many people do not read after school. Those who do are reading novels and fiction writers. Countless others making bonfires, and I've participated in this before. You make bonfires with your academic papers, those rough papers that you used to have, and sometimes even some books. I saw people in high school burning books, those ones who have finished their examinations, burning books, burning papers, and it was a ritual that we longed for. We longed to be the ones who will be one day setting up our academic fires, academic papers to go up in smoke and all those hullabaloos. And then you should see the way we run around town putting on gowns. Listen, I know this is a ritual. I know it's a rites of passage, okay? Just like we used to have rites of passage in the olden traditional African ideas. Right now we still have this rites of passage in terms of graduating. And I know we run around with these graduation gowns. Getting a graduation gown, by the way, you've got to spend some money getting the gowns on, and then you've got to go to town and you've got to take photos, and you have to invite your grandmother from the village, and there's a lot of halabaloo. You are celebrating end of learning, the town is jam-packed, the traffic is a mess. Why? Because people are graduating. It is that steeped. That philosophy is that steeped, and we follow it hook, line, and sinker every year. In fact, every year, very many graduation ceremonies are held, and you've got to be having this party where you are having a graduation ceremony, a graduation party at your house. You invite people, they come and they eat because you've been sweating. You've been sweating with books, and now you're no longer gonna be sweating with books. This philosophy has seen very many people placing incredible value on a certificate, to such an extent that certificates have become the holy grail of success, so to speak. And I can tell you this, that your degree, the one you got in the year 2000 or even the year 2017, it is obsolete in the present world. It is just something that shows that you've been able to answer some questions in school that, in academia. But life has many other areas that you're supposed to be alive to. Academics is supposed to give you an idea of what learning is and open you up. Actually, it's just supposed to introduce you into the world of learning. So when you graduate, you are not supposed to be putting aside your books. Actually, when I used to hear those graduation ceremonies on radio, the one thing I always used to hear the president, that time it was President Daniel Arap Moi, the president of the Republic of Kenya, who was the chancellor of all the universities. Do you know what he used to tell every graduation ceremony? He used to say, I confer you the powers, I give you the powers to go and to study matters concerning to the degree that you have already attained today. And yet, it's like people never used to hear that charge. It's like people who had been given a go-ahead to stop learning. So you have this graduation philosophy making people stopping to study. The last time someone picked a book was when they were in the university, and it was necessary for them because there was pressure for them to pass an exam. Now that they passed the exam, or now that they failed, and let's just go both ways. Now that you failed your exams, guess what? You don't pick any book. You don't read any business book. You don't read any book on relationships. You don't read any book on finances. You don't read any book on your self-esteem. You don't read any book on personal development. You don't read no book because of the philosophy of graduation. And to be honest with you, this philosophy of graduation does not just eat around those ones who are graduating. In fact, it even eats most those ones who did not have the opportunity to graduate, because they know, I don't have the papers, I did not graduate, there was no ceremony that was held for me, so I'm not special in this family, I'm not special in this community, people look down on me, I'm not valuable, I cannot add value. And those ones who are graduating, they are coming to this philosophy where they're entitled. We talked about the philosophy of entitlement. They think that they're the ones who are supposed to get the jobs. Many people think that, the certificate is all they have, instead of focusing on the content of their training, focusing on the value that their training is going to help them to bring to society. They're looking at life as if love owes them something because they graduated. That is why very many people ask for certificates after seminars. I've carried very many seminars in places, and for the most part, do you know what? People are asking me, are you going to give us certificates? When they see that your content is just rich, so rich, are you going to give us certificates? We really want certificates. I'm like, no, I ain't giving you nothing. I'm not giving you any certificate for this. What I want you to do is to go and espouse what I have trained you. I want to go and live what I have trained you. That is certificate enough. I don't want you to have something that Jay Niblick, the author of What's Your Genius, calls shelf help. Shelf help is when we have these degrees of ours, graduations of ours, and even books that we buy from bookshops, and we do not read them, or even if we read them, we don't use them. We put them on the shelf and they start gathering dust. Shelf help instead of self-help. An interviewing panel, because we're talking about the 7 detrimental philosophies in the modern job market. An interviewing panel, of which I've been part of, they are going to see someone who has been affected with the philosophy of graduation. They're going to see someone who has a battalion of certificates. And I've told you, I have seen interviews and I have been in interviews. I've conducted several. People are putting so much emphasis on certificates. There's a certificate in computer programming, a certificate in sales, a diploma in this, a diploma in that, and it's schizophrenic certificates. I mean, people have done nearly every single thing. People think that for me to get this job, I must prove myself academically. Wrong. You don't need to prove yourself academically. You just need to prove yourself as a human being. Use your intellect and bring value into life. Find a way of bringing value into life. See, people don't ask Mark Zuckerberg where his degree is, and I know that's a very holy example to use. People don't ask Steve Jobs where his academic certificate is. And to be honest with you, you see, Steve Jobs, Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, and all these people that we normally quote who have failed to get a certificate or failed to graduate, they used the bare minimum information that they got from school in order to build something for themselves. And so I'm not one of those coaches and speakers who are going to go bashing the school system and saying school is useless. No. That whoever jumped out of school, dropped out of school. No. Don't drop out of school if you don't have a Facebook idea. Don't drop out of school if you don't have a LinkedIn idea. Don't drop out of school if you don't have an Apple idea. If you don't have an idea that you can work on, stay in school. Go and get your degree. But don't think that degree entitles you for something. And don't stop learning once you are out of school. An interviewing panel is going to see people who are continuously learning. And they're going to stand head above others in terms of who is going to be given the job or not. They are increasingly interested in authenticity. The authenticity of the candidate. The authenticity that comes from you having internalized value, internalized the things that you are doing in life. Not just to show up with an academic paper. If someone came to me with a degree that he got in 10 years ago, honestly, and they have done nothing, and I have some guy who has done some certificates and they have actually used that certificate, that knowledge, to build even a website or to start a blog. Guess what? I'm going to go for the guy who has a certificate than the guy who stopped learning 10 years ago because they got a degree. So the philosophy of graduation, it states that you have finished, you've reached the pinnacle. No more need for you to learn anymore. All you need to do is to be given an opportunity to serve in society. The philosophy of graduation also places a lot of emphasis on what someone has been trained on, and totally negate what someone can train themselves on. In other words, if you have not been examined, do you know, I normally tell people, if you were to quantify, just like Ambrose Muchibi told us, if you were to quantify the things that I have trained myself, probably I should be having a PhD. And that's why when I tell people I don't have a degree and they're like, what do you mean? Stop lying. It is because I am not held up in this philosophy of graduation. It places a lot of emphasis on someone having been trained in bachelors in XYZ, bachelors in YXY, bachelors in this and this and this and this. And if this person has not learned something on their own, you've learned how to program. I have a brother who is a doctor, and he's gone out of his way and he's learning how to program using this programming language. I forget its name, but he started programming a long time ago, something that is totally unrelated, and no one is examining him. Now you will think that thing that he's done is useless, and he's developing applications and so on and so forth. He's using a product, I think a package called Python, an application called Python to do programming. The world today is wrong when it judges only that which counts. The philosophy of graduation places a lot of emphasis on those things that you've been trained on, and not things that you've trained yourself on. So self-education is becoming an extinct thing, but the world has come to discover, and like I told you in previous episodes, that big corporations like Google, big corporations like Apple have actually issued statements that they are no longer looking for degrees. Guess what I'm saying? They are looking for people who can add value to them, not people who have excelled academically. I have a story that I normally tell people. This is a story of an Australian billionaire called Peter J. Daniels, and I've talked about this guy on this podcast before. Peter J. Daniels was declared mentally uneducable, as in these teachers will tell him that you never amount to anything and you can't learn. He was quote-unquote stupid. One day at 26 years of age, he was seated, and his big dream was to become a bricklayer. Actually, he was a bricklayer, but his biggest dream was to become a championship boxer. So one day someone invites him to a Billy Graham crusade. He goes to a Billy Graham crusade, and Billy Graham, just bypassing, says, God made everybody equal. And something just clicks in Peter J. Daniels' mind. If God made everyone equal, it means that the guy with the degree and me are the same. It means the opportunities that life has accorded us are the same. And from that moment on, Peter was inspired and motivated to read. He brought 3 dictionaries, put one in his toilet, one in his car, and one in his living room. Will read a word and ask other people to confirm if that is the correct way that word is being read. And he will read mathematics. He did mathematics. He studied economics. He studied history. He read 1,000+ biographies. And by the end of the day, this man is a billionaire in Australia without a graduation, without a degree. So we need to come to that level where we love to study. We love to crack our heads. And I'm in the process of cracking my head right now, even as I speak to you, on a subject about work. You'll be shocked what I've found out from my own head and from my own research. And no one is going to give me a degree on that. And that work is worth something. I have several manuscripts that I have written on several topics that I have engaged my mind on. I have never stopped learning. Learning is the SI unit. It's my definition. I'm always on the go. And that's why people normally think that I'm very extremely intelligent and all those things. It's not about intelligence. It's about exposure. It's about firing the philosophy of graduation that says you only need to succeed in life if you can graduate. And once you've graduated, there's no need for learning. And once you have a certificate, it's going to open the door for you. No certificates are going to open doors for you, brother and sister. What's going to open the door for you is the content. Your application of the content, and you can get content from anywhere without necessarily being examined. Of course, the world has been skewed in such a way that those guys who have degrees have an upper hand than those guys who don't. But like I've told you, the world has come to that realization that the guys with the degrees or the guys without the degrees are not necessarily the bad ones. There's a TED Talk that you should look for by a lady, I've forgotten her name, but it's called The Scrapper. Go and find that TED Talk where she's saying that she's found those guys who don't have degrees are actually good, even better than those guys who do not. So the philosophy of graduation tells you that you should stop learning once you have a certificate. And I will tell you, if you do that, in the modern job market, you are obsolete. The same way a car is decreasing in value once it gets out of the bond is the same way you will decrease in value when you get out of university and stop learning. And I'm going to tweet that right away. Thank you so much for listening to this. I hope it makes a lot of sense to you. We're going to continue with these philosophies in the next episode. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Life Signatures Radio. If you enjoyed today's show, subscribe to Life Signatures Radio on iTunes, Stitcher, or visit our website at lifesignatures.libsyn.com. Life Signatures Radio, fresh, clean, and inspiring.